What's up, guys? My name's Ben, and welcome to my new YouTube channel, Bingram Bikes. So a little bit about me. I just recently graduated from college, and making me now a former Division III track and field runner. And in the wake of my graduation, I've been looking for a new way to stay fit, and I've recently taken up cycling. I just recently purchased a Wahoo Kicker Zwift Core 1, and I really want to, record my first experiences using that, well, especially when it comes to racing. So in this video here, you're going to see I took a FTP test, or like a functional threshold power test, I think is what it's called, where you just do all out power for 20 minutes and then it kind of determines what you could do for an hour. And it kind of helps you figure out how hard you should go in workouts, just like a baseline test, but it also helps you get placed into categories for Zwift racing. So after I did the test, I hopped into a Zwift race the next day, and in this video you should be able to watch both.
So before we hop into the actual biking, I just want to show you guys my setup real quick. So right here is my bike. It is a Trek 1 Series 1.5. And then I've got a pair of clip-in shoes here. They're mountain biking shoes. As you can see, they only have the two sporks or whatever. But from what I've heard, the mountain biking shoes, they don't really decrease performance, but they're a little more comfortable, easier to walk in. And then here's the trainer. It's the Wahoo Kicker Core Zwift 1. So the whole setup works pretty nice, and then I just set my laptop up right here, and then I've got this massive TV that's right next to the bike, so I can watch something if I want, although it kind of takes up my entire field of vision. And then, of course, you need the fan to help cool off, and then it's on a yoga mat so I don't drip sweat onto my rug.
So I've opted to document Zwift races as opposed to real outside races for three main reasons. The first being it's more accessible. On Zwift there's like 10 races every single hour that you can hop into, versus if you're trying to go outside, it's a lot more of a hassle to try and find a race. I mean, I'm not even sure. I haven't even tried to look. But then the second one being, honestly, I'm scared to race a bike outside. I've seen quite a few crashes, and I don't have the handling skills that come with years of experience because I am a new rider. And then the final reason is, the barrier to entry on a Zwift race is a lot lower. While I do have a pretty nice bike setup, I don't really know how well it would compete with people riding these $10,000 new super aero bikes that are like weigh 1 pound and all this crazy stuff. So I feel like the Zwift kind of levels the playing field, as long as you're honest with your weight.
All right, so here we are in Zwift. I'm just going to select my Wahoo Kicker Core as my power meter, and then I'm going to select my Zwift controllers here, and after that we're going to just head on into Zwift for the first time. Alright, so now that we're in Zwift, I'm going to go ahead and navigate over to the Workouts tab in the top corner, and I'm going to select the 20-minute FTP power test. And before I did complete this FTP test, I did go ahead and go through the Zwift tutorial. So I treated that as my warm-up. So as you'll see, once I head into this FTP test, I am going to skip through the warm-up and just get going straight into the fitness test. Alright, so as we get into it, you can kind of see that I did have a little bit of trouble adjusting to the electronic gearing and just kind of figuring out how much power I should put out through the pedals and what gears I needed to get into. It took me about 30 to 45 seconds to really settle into the pace that I had thought that I wanted, which was about 300 watts. Before going into this test, I did set a few goals for myself, the first being to average over 300 watts for the 20 minutes, and then the second being to get as close as possible to 4 watts per kilogram for my FTP, which would be about 95% of my total power, meaning I would need to put out about 330 watts for the 20-minute power test to get an FTP of around 315 watts, which I quickly did realize was a little bit of an ambitious goal. So I kind of went back to that first goal of just trying to settle into around 300 watts. So I'm not going to go through the whole test because, that would take 20 minutes. But here I will scroll through quickly, and as we can see, for the first 10-15 minutes, I was settling into the pace pretty well. I was able to fluctuate between 300 and 310 watts, averaging out to 305 watts for the first 15 minutes, which is something that I knew was within my range because I had done a workout just previously on a different trainer before I got the Wahoo, where I was able to average about 312 watts for 4 sets of 5 minutes. But as we know, we got to that 15-minute mark, things started to get a little difficult. My watts kept on ticking down, and I was only able to average between 260 and 300 watts for these last 5 minutes. Luckily, I had built up a bit of a buffer to allow myself, to slip a little bit at the end while keeping my average over 300 watts. But as we get into this final stretch here, I was in the pain cave. I was kind of having to grit my teeth and put everything I had into the pedals. And as we see here for those last 10 seconds, I was able to, muster up some sort of kick at the end, just barely get to about 400 watts for that last second there. And I was able to get an FTP of 286 watts for the 20 minutes, which comes out to 3.67 watts per kilogram at my weight. And so now that I had an FTP, which I was pretty happy with, I did hit my first goal, I was able to get into some racing. All right, so here we are at the start of my first race. I did a Category C Zwift crit racing of the Volcano circuit. So it was 3 laps, and the total race, I believe, was just over 10, 11 miles. So the whole thing took around half an hour. So I had heard that Zwift races get out super hard, and as you can see, I wasn't quite prepared for how hard they got out. So I found myself immediately off the back with this one other rider, and just within the first 20 seconds, we already were down 2 seconds, 6 seconds to the guy at the very front. So it was definitely not the start I was looking for. I knew I was going to have to do some work to bridge my way up to the front guys. Probably not work I'd want to do. And then you can see that I actually accidentally turned the brightness off on my computer. I was trying to set up my phone to record a video of myself, and my phone tipped over and turned off the brightness on my computer. So then I had to unclip my shoes to get the brightness back up. And, after that whole debacle, I found myself 6 seconds behind the pack, and the one guy I was with had separated himself. So, I was off to a really tough start to my first race. I ended up having to put in a pretty strong effort. I put up about 400 watts to try and bridge my way back up for a few minutes. Luckily, there was this small hill to help me. I was able to pick up a featherweight power up, and ideally this is something that I would have saved for either the later feature in the race or even towards the very end. But since I was so far off the back at the start of the race, I figured it would be smart to just use it as soon as possible to try and bridge my way up to the front as quickly as possible, make sure that the race didn't get away from me before it even begun. So as you can see, I'm still averaging over 400 watts here, and this is well above my FTP, which is 280 watts. Or 287, so I'm having to work pretty hard. My heart rate, as you can see, I did attach a heart rate monitor, just the one on my watch. And, we've been racing for 2 minutes, and my heart rate's up to 185, so that's not exactly where you want to be. I do have a pretty high max. It's around 210. But still, 185 is pretty high for me, especially after just 2 minutes of riding. But I'm kind of making my way back up to this main pack. They're coming back to me, and I'm finally able to bridge my way up. I'm able to kind of ease off the pedals a little bit, go down from 400 watts to just under 300, 250 to 300. So finally felt good to get back to the pack, use the draft to my advantage. But I had, used one of my matches before the real racing had even started, which is, super unfortunate. So as we keep riding here, I want to note that, this course, it does only have one feature. So there's this it's a short but it'll sting hill. It gets up to about like 8% grade, but it's over before you know it. But it comes pretty close to the finish line. So especially on the final lap, it's definitely where people are looking to make a move. But even before that, every time we go up this hill, which we went up maybe 4 times, because there's the lead-in where I believe we still went over it, people really start to push some watts. So as we get to the little short climb for the first time, you can see that the guys at the front of the pack are really starting to pick up the pace. We got people averaging around 7 watts per kilogram. I'm pushing over 400 watts here up this short hill, just trying to stay on these wheels. Because while it is a really short climb, you don't want to accidentally let any gaps open up. So the bunch does stay together over this first little climb. One guy gets briefly off the front, but he's pulled back in pretty quick. I'm not even sure if that was an intentional move. But for like the majority of this race, as you'll kind of see as I scroll through it, the pack it stays mostly together. We're pushing solid power, I think around like 250, 260 watts. So it's definitely not comfortable, but it's nothing that's too challenging. And you'll just kind of see me floating in between the front and the back of the pack here. Sometimes I'll go off the back a little bit, sometimes I'll go off the front a little. I'm still kind of trying to figure out how racing in Zwift works. This is, after all, my first race. But eventually I think one rider falls off the back on maybe the second lap, and then on the third lap another rider falls off the back. And as we come to the feature for the final time, things are really starting to pick up, as people are getting a little antsy for that sprint finish that we have after the climb. Maybe the people who are less confident in their sprint are kind of trying to launch early, whereas people more like me who are kind of looking forward to having an opportunity to sprint are just trying to hold the group together. So as we get ready to approach the feature for the final time, people are really starting to ramp things up. Some people maybe are looking to use this as a slingshot to the finish line if they don't really want to sprint at the end. And you can kind of see that's what's starting to happen. We have one of the guys towards the front, Rhino, he's pushing 8 watts per kilogram, so he's into the red zone, I guess, as Zwift is calling it. And I've kind of started to fall off towards the back. As you can see, everyone in front of me is activating their power-ups. But earlier I had snagged one of the drafting power-ups, and from what I've heard from other YouTubers, it kind of seems like it's not the right time to use the drafting power-up on a hill, so I kind of wait till we get off the hill. I'm towards the back of the pack, but I'm still feeling pretty good because everything's together, and I popped the drafting power-up about 0.2 miles to go. And I launched kind of early from the back, so still with about like 750 feet to go. And I'm getting a little antsy of the guy who's up front all alone. And here we can see I'm really starting to go. It's 10, 11 watts per kilogram, pushing 800 watts. And I'm coming up on him as we approach the line. And I am able to just take him barely at the finish line on my first ever Zwift race. And I'm able to somehow capture the win by just 1/4 of a second. So as we pop up to the stats screen, you can see I averaged 8 watts per kilogram for 15 seconds there at the end. And my total watt average was 269 with 3.4 watts per kilogram. So it's kind of around the range of the people around me, but maybe I was doing a little bit more work than them, just especially because of what happened at the start of the race. But, still super, super happy to win. It was a little bit of a smaller race, but yeah, I still had to give it my all, especially at the end, and I was very pleased to win.
My phone fell, but we got the win. So let's go.
So as I just briefly end this video, I just want to take a look at my critical power chart. So you can see that my 5-second power output for the race was 846, for a minute was 521, 5 minutes was 310, and my heart rate was mostly in zone 4, but definitely got up into zone 5, peaking just over 200, and then the average power, including the warm-up and cool-down, was 246 watts. So thanks everyone for watching, and if you have any suggestions for future videos, please let me know in the comments below.